soliciting feedback from your team is extremely important, and I think it's important to do it formally, but more important to do it informally. So the way that I do it informally is if I do something where I think maybe I just screwed up, or I see somebody's face, I watch people's faces a lot, or their body language. And I'll call it out. I'll say, that didn't sound just right to me, and I'm noticing XYZ person, you're frowning. Tell me what you're thinking. So part of it is just paying attention, not just to what people are saying, but to how they're looking, or whether they're folding their arms or whatnot. Another thing that I'll do is, at least once a quarter, I will say, what should I stop doing, or what should I start doing, or what should I continue doing? Just a pat phrase. Another phrase that I've used is, what could I do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? And I think just asking that point blank, sometimes you'll get nothing. If you get nothing, you have to embrace the discomfort, right? It's tempting for people to say, oh, everything's fine. And when somebody says, oh, everything's fine, it's tempting to say, good, I'm so glad. And then to sort of check the box, oh, I asked for feedback. You have to actually say, no, there's something. You have to tell me something. I'll give you a week to think about it, but next week we're not going to talk about anything in our one-on-one until you've given me something I'm doing wrong. I know I'm not perfect. In Japanese manufacturing facilities, they would put employees in a red box, and you weren't allowed to leave the red box until you had identified something that was screwed up. So I've never literally created a red box in my office, but you sort of have to be willing to push people to an uncomfortable place to give you the feedback. And then the most important thing when you've solicited feedback is to reward the truth. And you reward the truth in a bunch of different ways. If somebody tells you you stink, you buy a stick of deodorant. So somebody told me that I was interrupting him a lot, and I knew that I'm an inveterate interrupter. And I also knew that it was a behavior I wouldn't be able to change immediately. But I wanted to show him that I heard his feedback and that I was trying. So I actually wrote interrupter on a rubber band and wore it around my wrist, and I would sit next to him in meetings and say, you snap this rubber band, and we had the relationship where he would snap the rubber band if I interrupt you. And at least then he knew that I cared, even though I hadn't managed to fix the problem. He knew I was trying. So sort of make your efforts as visible as possible to others, to reward the truth. Another part of rewarding the truth is, and this is the hardest part, is if you disagree with the feedback. One of the things that you owe the person is honesty about your disagreement and a fuller explanation of why. So I would say that it's never too early to start giving each other feedback. I would start it really early on in the life of a startup. Even if it's you and a co-founder, you should be giving each other feedback. You should make sure you're clear on what you're trying to do, right? What direction you're headed. And you should be really clear on building your team. So I think you start doing this stuff really early. And I think that if you can come up with a process that's more efficient than ad hoc early on, that's going to help you get in the mindset of scaling, of creating process that actually is more efficient than no process. I think that one of the most important things to do when you ask for advice and then you decide not to take it is to really take the time to call it out, to say, I asked you for this advice, here's what you told me, I'm not going to do that, and here's why, and explain it. I also think that you can get away with that more easily if it's in a context of you often ask for advice and you do sometimes take it. If you never take the advice, then you're hosed. There was one of the biggest jerks I ever worked with, went on this 3-week listening tour, which basically meant dozens of people had to spend a lot of time putting together these decks that he was not going to listen to. It was very clear what he was going to do in the beginning. That is horrible. Never do that to your people. That puts you firmly in the asshole quadrant. One of the trickiest things about getting criticism, especially when you're soliciting criticism from somebody who works for you. So they've already put themselves out there to criticize you in most cases. One of the hardest things about that is when you disagree with what they're saying. And I have found one of the things that I will do is I'll say, I haven't thought about it that way before. Let me think some more about it, and can we have another discussion? And I try to, in a sense, I'm trying to buy myself some time to make sure I'm not just reacting emotionally. And then I'm also buying myself some time to find something in what they've told me that I can agree with or that I can take action on. But I think in the end, if you've asked somebody to give you feedback, you owe them the respect of telling them what you really think. And if you disagree, I believe in order to be clear, you have to tell them that you disagree, but you also have to explain why. And just take the time and the respect to explain that you disagree and explain why. But I generally try to wait a day. Not a week, a day. For a self-assessment, I think it's a great idea, by the way, to share your self-assessment with your team, as well as with your boss. And I think, there's no one right formula. At Google, it was accomplishments, strengths, areas for development. I think that worked reasonably well. Other places like to talk about what went right and what went wrong. So there's no one right. I mean, think about something that works for you and just do it. Just start writing good things, bad things. That works fine. I wish there were a great quarterly 360 tool. I haven't seen one. Maybe one does exist out there. I believe that Qualtrics is developing one that will be good. But basically, the 360 should be extremely, extremely lightweight. Again, you shouldn't be allowed to ask for feedback from more than 5 or 6 people. They should say misses, meets, exceeds. Check plus, check minus. Just three simple categories. 80% of the time it's going to be in the middle. 10% you're missing, 10% you're above. Very simple. And they should only have to write a little bit and only when you're missing or you're exceeding. So it should not take people hours and hours to do because you won't do it quarterly otherwise. And formalizing it, I think, is really useful. So that's it on the 360. When you request feedback, again, there doesn't need to be. You should put the people who work for you as part of your 360, but you should also, I think, reserve a one-on-one, ideally once a quarter, and tell the person working for you, in this one-on-one, I want, instead of the usual where you come with an agenda and I'm listening to you, I want you to come prepared to tell me what I can stop doing, what I should start doing, and what you want me to continue doing, or however you want to frame it. Is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? Feedback for me, whatever. Nothing too formal. Just do it and make them come with something. So I think one of the things that people could do to incorporate feedback into their daily life in a way that's lightweight is just either create an app or put a piece of paper up by your desk with a smiley face, frowny face, unclear to clear, and let people just stick little stickies on. You know, were you brutally honest? You know, maybe I was frowning, but it was really clear, and I'm going to learn from it. Were you cruelly empathetic? Were you sort of mincing your words and it wasn't clear? Maybe you were saying nice things, but I don't really know what you meant. You know, maybe you were an asshole that day, and let people put the little sticker in the asshole quadrant. Maybe you built trust over time with somebody, and you told them something that was very clear. Maybe it was, you know, extremely harsh criticism, but they know you and trust you, so it makes you smile automatically. So I think that's like a lightweight thing that doesn't take any time, and that helps feedback. People just be more conscious of it. There was somebody who I taught who did that, put that, and people would walk into his office and say, I'm going to be down there, you know, aren't I? You're about to be brutally honest with me. And somehow that made it more easy for him to be more clear and to be more brutally honest. So I think that's a good idea. I also think that having a lightweight, once a quarter sort of feedback review process is worth doing. But I mean seriously lightweight. So many companies where I've worked, it's like everybody's in a bad mood for a week during performance review season. Doesn't need to take that long. Check plus, check minus. If there's a plus or a minus, put in 140 characters and have the conversations. But I think it's worth doing once a quarter. Another thing that's worth doing maybe twice a year is putting your team, thinking about your team and saying, okay, if this is low to high performance, and this is sort of a steep growth trajectory and a gradual growth trajectory, put people in the different quadrants. Like the people who are on a steep growth trajectory, who are performing really well, you better start thinking about how to promote them or how to give them the next harder assignment. People who are great at their job, performed really well, but on a more gradual growth trajectory, don't promote them. That's not what they want. It's not going to be good for them. People who are in the middle, don't accept that, and definitely don't confuse those people in the middle with the people who are great at their job, but on a more gradual growth trajectory. In fact, get those people who are great at their job on a more gradual growth trajectory to train those people who are in the middle. See if you can move them over to the right. If they're here for more than, call it, 8 quarters, they're not getting better. You've got to do something else with them. If you can't move them to the right, you got to move them to the left. If somebody ought to be great at their job, but isn't, and you don't understand why, figure it out. Maybe you need to change their job. Maybe you need to change their manager. If somebody is bad at their job and getting worse, they're low performer and they're on a negative growth trajectory, fire them. Get rid of them. It's they're going to be better off somewhere else, and it's not fair to your top performers to carry these people. So do that. Put the names in the boxes and take the appropriate actions, and come up with the plans and force your people to come up with the plans. So those are some things you got to do. So I think that there's a couple of different ways to answer the question about how long you let something go on. The first is that if you see an issue, you address it immediately. Don't save it up for a one-on-one. A one-on-one is not the sort of parking lot for all the issues you're seeing, but not addressing in the moment. So if you see a problem, you address it in the moment. And you give the person an opportunity to fix it. If you don't see any improvement quickly, then the feedback gets stronger. There's a few exceptions, of course. If somebody's going through some sort of personal situation, you give them a break. If they're going through a personal situation that makes them impossible to deal with, but that you believe is temporary, ask them to leave the office for 2 or 3 weeks. Go on vacation. Go deal with give them, you want to be humane. And in those cases, you're going to let things fester. But As long as you're seeing improvement and enough improvement, then you keep working. When you see no improvement or things going the wrong direction, then you take action. So I believe that a weekly one-on-one meeting is really important, but I don't think that weekly meeting is for feedback. Feedback should be more impromptu in the moment. The purpose of the weekly one-on-one, I believe, is more around direction setting than it is around giving feedback. I think that the weekly one-on-one should be the employees' meeting. The employee should set the agenda. What the manager ought to do is listen to the person, not just, and don't let it be just an update meeting. They can email that to you. What is the person, not just what is the person working on, but what are they not working on that they want to work on? What are they working on that they don't really want to work on? And how can you change it? What are the blockers they have? So it's really, we've talked a little bit about the importance of setting direction. Again, it's not your job as the manager to set direction. It's your job to get your team to set direction. So part of that is listening, and that's your goal in the one-on-one, is to listen to the person who works for you. I do actually think it's a good idea to praise in public, criticize in private, whenever possible. Having said that, once you've developed a relationship with a team, it becomes more possible to criticize in public. You want to create a culture of feedback, right? And that means sometimes it has to happen in public. But I try to open myself up to criticism in public first. So I've worked with people who are very likely to criticize me in private, and I've asked them, next time say this in public, so that other people can learn, so that if I'm making this mistake, other people are making the mistake. Another thing that I've done with sort of public criticism in an all hands that I used to run both at my startup and at Google, I would ask people to criticize themselves in public. And I actually bought a stuffed monkey called Whoops the Monkey. And so people would nominate, oh, I screwed up, here's what happened. And the point was, other people would then learn from this person's screw up, and the person got automatic forgiveness, right? And it became a great way to make failure safe and to help people sort of learn from their mistakes. But again, it was self-criticism in public. I have been embarrassed by public criticism, but I also am so aware that it's beneficial for the whole team, and that if I cop to it and if I learn from it, that it's a good thing. So that sort of, when I've been criticized in public, there have been moments when I'm in that lower right-hand quadrant where I'm unhappy, but the criticism is very clear. But if I realize that it's that I've learned something, then I'm in the end more happy than unhappy about it. For example, there was a guy who worked for me. I had always been told I moved too fast. Kim, you move too fast. But I knew what that meant, but I didn't exactly know what it meant. And this guy on my team once, I had sent a boneheaded email out to the team. And he said, Kim, you're awfully fast to hit send. That was really helpful feedback. It has saved me from 1,000 mistakes, 1,000 more prevented me from sending out a bunch of other boneheaded emails. So that's an example of some public criticism that I found helpful. And since I find it helpful, I assume others do. But you want to be gentler in public.